What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Real Packers Talk, the podcast dedicated to everything green and gold. I am your host, Ethan Peltier. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Real Packers Talk, as well as on YouTube and Spotify. Before I get into the details of today's episode, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and that is being that I have not recorded or published an episode in quite some time. The last time I was able to record an episode was the last week of the regular season, and unfortunately I just have not been able to be as consistent or on top of it since then, so I do apologize. The other thing, though, was the fact that the Packers didn't make the playoffs. I didn't really feel like there was much to talk about. Obviously, there was the Aaron Rodgers fiasco and whether or not he was going to get traded, which he did, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But when it comes to the offseason, I was not... There just wasn't a lot for me to talk about, in my opinion. At least nothing that I could talk about that everyone and their mother wasn't already talking about on the internet when it came to the trade discourse. So that's kind of what I wanted to address today. I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I did want to share my thoughts because I've been sitting on it for a while, and I figured what better time to get back into the swing of things than right now. We just got done with the draft yesterday. So what I'd like to do today is briefly go over the Aaron Rodgers trade and then kind of segue into the draft. Now I'm going to go over all of the selections that we made, but I'm not going to go in depth. I do plan on doing more specific in-depth analysis of these players that we drafted later. And I'll see how I structure that. I might go player by player and do an episode for each individual. Or I might decide to group them up into either maybe position groups or the rounds that they got drafted into. But look for that in the future. Today is just a quick, hey, welcome back. I want to get back in the swing of things. So without further ado, let me talk about Aaron Rodgers and then we'll see where it goes. So when the season ended, there was a ton of talk. Was Aaron Rodgers, did he play his last game as a Packer? What's the team going to do moving forward? If you ask me personally, before I even talk about this, I just want to say that I personally thought it was time. I thought that moving on from Aaron Rodgers was a smart thing to do as a team. I love the guy. He's been my quarterback since as long as I can remember, since as long as I've watched football, for sure. And it's tough to see him go, but at the end of the day, I do think this was the right decision. So, after weeks of trade discussions and rumors, we finally have a trade that has been set up with the New York Jets. The Packers and the Jets swapped picks number 15 and 13, so the Packers jumped up a couple spots. The Packers also received the second-round pick this year, which was pick 42 overall, and as well as a fifth. And then they also received a second-round pick for next year in 2023 that could turn into a first-round, given that Aaron Rodgers plays at least 65% of his snaps in New York this season. If you ask me, that's a pretty good deal for both teams, and I don't want to count all my eggs in the basket before they hatch, but it seems like the Packers are probably... I have a pretty good feeling that they're going to get another first round next year. I highly doubt that Rodgers, barring he doesn't get injured or anything like that, I find it hard to believe that he would not play at least 65% of the snaps. So I think the Packers got a decent amount of compensation. Obviously, they weren't going to just give Aaron Rodgers up for nothing. But I'm glad that it wasn't just for like a handful of later round picks. Like they actually made it they made an emphasis on wanting to get those first round picks, and that's good value. Again, when you're trading a 4-time MVP quarterback, you should expect to get good value, which I think this is fair. I didn't think that the Packers absolutely fleeced the Jets or anything like that. And on the other side of this deal, the Jets didn't have to sell the farm to get their guy. You know, they did give up a couple of premium picks, but the Jets are in a good position. They've got a young team, and if they truly think that they're just a quarterback away from being a serious contender, look, they went out and they got their guy. So I wish Aaron Rodgers the best of luck out in New York. But I don't think either team got quote-unquote fleeced. I think this was a pretty fair deal for both teams. As I've already mentioned, I personally thought that it was time to move on. We got good compensation. That's honestly the best case scenario, in my opinion, is what happened. Um, I think it was important that we got this trade done before the draft happened this year. You want to stockpile up on those picks and try and build a team around Jordan Love. That way we can try to be a little bit competitive, try to get our young quarterback some help. And then before I move on to the next segment of this episode, I do want to just take a moment to speak from the heart about how I feel about Rodgers. Again, I'm very biased. He is my favorite player of all time. So I just want to say some things. First of all, I'm just very grateful to watch a guy like Aaron Rodgers for over 15 years and to know that your team is competitive and could have a legitimate chance at making a championship run every year he starts. That's phenomenal. He is a generational talent, and I don't think Green Bay is going to see a quarterback of that caliber for a while. My fingers are crossed that Jordan Love is amazing and can be even better than Aaron Rodgers, but I do want to be realistic. He was my guy. As I've already said, I wish him the best of luck in New York, and I'm looking forward to the future, but it does feel weird. I literally have an Aaron Rodgers poster in my room. I'll probably just leave it up for now. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sit on it, but I love the guy. I think he's great. Very talented quarterback. He's got a bit of a... I don't know exactly how to put it. I think he has a bit of an abrasive or just... He's not everyone's cup of tea, for lack of a better term. But to me, he will always be one of my favorite players of all time, and I'm so grateful for everything that he's done in Green Bay. So thank you, Aaron. Best of luck out in New York, but I also hope that you guys lose a bunch of games this year so the Packers get a better first-round pick. Yeah, I just wanted to say that and wrap that up before I move on to the next portion of this episode. Now I want to finish this episode up by briefly going over all of the Packers selections in this year's draft. But before I do get into that, I just want to say this one thing. Before any of y'all go on the internet and start looking up draft grades and formulating opinions on how good or bad this year's draft was, keep in mind that it takes at least 2 to 3 years to actually determine the value of a draft. Sometimes players start off really hot and they regress. Sometimes players start off slow and they get really hot later. One player that I can think of for the Packers specifically off the top of my head is Rashawn Gary. I remember when he got picked 12th overall in 2019 and everyone and their mother hated that pick. And he's now turned into probably our best pass rusher. I just wanted to say that before we say that we either hate or love these selections, let's just see how they play out first. I'm just happy that we had a boatload of picks and that we were able to really stock up. In my opinion, this is a very talented class, one with a ton of potential, and I like a lot of these picks. I do plan on going into more detail for on a more like individual basis. I would like to do. I'll probably end up doing an episode for each player. Maybe for like the 7th round, I'll end up bunching them all together because we had a bunch of picks in the 7th, but I just wanted to speak my piece when it comes to this. Don't get too excited, but also don't be down in the dumps. Let's just see how this turns out. I think this is a really, the potential for this class is insane, and I'm really excited. The Packers were able to make 13 total selections in this draft, which is a lot. I can't remember the Packers had that many selections in one draft. Now, I do know that the Packers are the type of team that likes to stock up on their picks because the philosophy is, the more attempts at bat, so to speak, the higher the chance that you're actually going to hit something at some point. So, they had 1 first-round pick, 2 second-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, 2 picks in the 5th, 2 picks in the 6th, and 4 picks in the 7th. Before I name everyone's name, I do want to briefly go over the first pick that they made because obviously that's the big one. That's the one that people are going to talk about for a while now. And that was Lucas Van Ness at pick 13 overall. Part of the other reason that I wanted to address this one is because there were a lot of people that were angry about this pick. And if you ask, I just don't understand the anger or the frustration. I thought this was a really good pick, and I'll tell you why. So like I already said, at 13th overall, the Packers selected Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. He is a defensive end standing at 6'5", weighing in at 272 pounds, and the kid is only 21 years old. He turns 22 in July. He's a athletic freak, a monster. Very much reminds me of Rashawn Gary, and I think the pairing of those two is going to be phenomenal if he can develop and progress the way that I think he should. I think a lot of Packers fans are obviously upset that we didn't select Jackson Smith-Njigba because he was sitting there at 13. But I just want to say briefly, or real quick, the Packers typically don't select pass catchers like tight ends and receivers in the first round. That's not their MO. It never has been, and I don't know if it ever will be. And that's okay, because I think every year we see teams that pick players in later rounds that turn out to be studs. Like, think about like Terry McLaurin. I believe he was like a 4th round pick. So there's value all over the board in every round. You can find guys that are undrafted that can catch the ball. When it comes to finding receivers for Jordan Love, I didn't think that Jackson Smith-Njigba was the end-all be-all. Yes, is he a phenomenal, very talented player? Of course. But I understand why the Packers didn't go Jackson Smith-Njigba. Also, keep in mind, he fell all the way to 20. I don't know what that tells you. I don't know, like, it's not like teams were itching to just trade up and take this player, right? I just wanted to state that. I think that Lucas Van Ness has a ton of potential. I really, really like this pick. For anyone that's upset about it, and I would take a wild guess that you were probably upset at the Rashawn Gary pick too, and look how that turned out. I think the Packers will be able to develop Lucas Van Ness into a nice pass rusher. But I would love to go into more detail about him and all of his traits, his strengths and weaknesses. I'll probably end up doing that episode sometime either tomorrow or later in the week. Just wanted to speak my piece on that. So, moving on. I'm just going to name all the picks in the rounds, the overall pick that they were, position, and college that they went to, and then I'll just kind of wrap this episode up. So, the next Packers pick, or the next selection that the Packers had was in the second round, pick 42 overall, and they went with Luke Musgrave, tight end out of Oregon State. Then again, in the second round at pick number 50, they had Jaden Reed, wide receiver from Michigan State. In the third round, they picked 78th overall, Tucker Kraft, tight end out of South Dakota State University. In the fourth round, pick 116th overall, they picked up Colby Wooden, defensive lineman from Auburn. In the fifth round, they had a couple of picks, so they went with Sean Clifford at 149th overall, quarterback out of Penn State. And then at 159 overall, they went Carl Brooks, defensive lineman from Bowling Green. In the sixth round, they ended up going with Dontavion Wicks, wide receiver from Virginia. And then again at pick 207 in the sixth round, they went with Anders Carlson, kicker from Auburn. And then to wrap it all up, in the seventh round, they had four picks. At 232 overall, they went with Carrington Valentine, cornerback from Kentucky. 235 overall, they went with Lou Nichols, running back from Central Michigan. Pick 242 overall, they went with Anthony Johnson Jr. from, he's a safety from Iowa State. And then lastly, they went with pick 256 overall, Grant Dubose from wide receiver from Charlotte. As I've already mentioned, I love the value of this draft. I don't think that quantity is better than quality necessarily, but again, the idea is if you have more attempts at picking up these guys, the likelihood that at least one of them is going to turn into a stud gets that likelihood increases, right? I think the Packers addressed a lot of needs as well. They picked up receivers, tight ends. They addressed the defensive line, edge rushers. They did pick up a safety, which I know a lot of people would have liked them to address that a little bit earlier in the draft. But look, this is the way that their board fell. And we've got 13 new Packers, people. Get excited. This is really exciting. We've got some explosive playmakers on the offense, and then some really nice potential on the defense as well. I can't rave about this enough. I can't wait to get into more detail about these players, because there's actually a few that I don't really know anything about. I'm gonna watch some tape over the next couple of days, write down some notes, and then I'd like to gather all my thoughts and then share them with y'all later this week. So like I said, look forward to that. And yeah, I don't really have much else left to talk about today. As I've already mentioned, it's been a long time since I recorded, so I just wanted to kind of get it out of the way, get back into the swing of things. I'm going to try super, super hard to be more consistent. The offseason is weird. It's a slow time for me. In my personal life, I've got a bunch of things going on as well, so I'm just trying to, get everything settled. But so exciting. The future of the Packers, we're in the Jordan Love era now. This is going to be exciting. There are probably going to be some bumps in the road, and I would also love to talk more about Jordan Love and what I think the team will look like with him moving forward. All of that will be discussed on another day. Thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you making Real Packers Talk a part of your day. You can find me anywhere on Instagram or Twitter at Real Packers Talk, as well as on YouTube and Spotify. Thank you all so much again for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Pack Go.